We now have Jad Yaghi, and Paul's already told you Jad was our 2010 TiQuest winner. He is CEO of Verol Incorporated. Verol has received substantial amount of financing from leading Canadian venture capital fund in very difficult market environment. Previously, Jad was consultant with Monitor Group, where he worked with clients in the online recruiting, fast-moving consumer goods, pharma, biotech, and PE industry. He holds an MBA from Rockman School of Management, and he is BE Computer and Communication Engineering. Jad is a wonderful speaker. We invite him to now speak on business model canvas, its elements, and value proposition. Let's welcome Jad.
So yeah, Paul, that was an interesting foray into history. Although I might disagree with hostile takeovers. Alexander the Great might disagree with you. Hitler might disagree with you. You know, so there's so many people who might disagree with you, but that's not the point.
I didn't say it was good. I just said it happened.
Oh, it happened successfully too. But we get assimilated, so that's why we forget. Anyway, so I'm going to take a next step, and I'm going to talk about, okay, what are the tools that we can use, right? Okay, we've got an idea. It sounds great, but then what? What are the tools that we can use to take the next step, right? Those of you who do know me know that I hate PowerPoint. I love involving people. So you know, the more you get involved, the more excited I get. The more excited I get, the more fun this is going to be for everybody. Okay? So I'm going to ask you a question. Right? We're going to start with a value proposition because in my opinion, in my experience, everything starts from there. Everything starts with the value you're creating. So, what does a value proposition mean? What does value mean? Can anybody tell me what value means? Come on, somebody here. Yeah, go ahead, man.
What do you gain from it?
What you gain from it as an entrepreneur, you mean?
No, as the customer.
Okay. Very important distinction, right? So you're saying that value is what I'm giving to the customer, right? How do you break down value? How do you measure it? Yeah?
It's unique.
Sorry?
It's unique to some like, another value proposition.
Okay, but how do you break it down? How do you measure it? How do you measure value?
Income.
Income. What does income mean? What's an equivalent of income?
Will someone pay you for the product?
Will someone pay you for the product, right? That's how you measure value. Has someone paid you for it, or is someone willing to pay you for it, right? If I list my house for $10 billion, is it worth $10 billion?
We don't know
Oh,
yet.
yeah. Okay, you're the real estate guy. So when is the house equal to the value? When? Someone?
You get an offer?
Actually buys it.
No, not when you get an offer, when somebody actually
Oh, yeah.
gives you the money, right? Right, so that's the important thing about value, is that somebody's willing to pay you money for it, right? That's value. Now, what is a value proposition? What is a value proposition? We've established that value is somebody's willing to give you money, okay?
What you suggest it's worth.
Okay, that's value proposition. Now we need to start breaking down how we're going to deliver that value to the customer, right? That's the best way that I can explain it. You know, there's so many theories, so many books about value. Go ahead, Paul.
Well,
If
if you're asking, I'll jump
Yeah,
in.
go ahead.
Value is not, one form of value is monetary,
Right.
dollar, attributable.
I'm getting to
Okay,
that.
okay,
Okay.
go on.
Hold on.
Well, you asked.
Yeah, no, agreed. Okay. So since Paul brought it up, let's take it to the logical conclusion. Yes, one very important way is a qualitative measure of value, right? A dollar sign. You're looking at price, or you're looking at efficiencies, which usually brings down the price. So one value proposition might be, for example, to say, I want to reduce my supply chain costs by 20%, or X%, which is what Toyota did. They said, look, we've got so much inventory, we've got to get rid of it. How do we get rid of it? That is how, what I'm going to talk today, those tools of I identified my value proposition is lowering the cost of my sales or the cost of my inventory by X%. Now how do we do it? Right? There's so many tools. We're going to talk about one, which is called the business model canvas. We'll get to there in a moment. The other way to measure value is qualitative. Have I made a difference, for example? Let's say this is more for value brands. What is a value brand? Can anybody give me an example of a value brand? Apple. That's a good, yeah. I'm paying more for an apple than I am paying for something of equivalent because it makes me feel better. right? What's another value brand, just so we can cement the example?
Gucci.
Gucci, yeah, any brand, right? It's in my opinion, it's insane, right? You walk into a store and you're paying $4,000 for a Gucci purse that costs what, $50 to produce, but you're paying. It's a value brand because you're paying for something that makes you feel good or makes you show off. Hey, look, I've got a $4,000 purse, right? No judgment, but I'm just saying that that is a value proposition that is not just about the value of the purse. It's also about the pleasure, the actual self-actualization that that purse brings me. Yes, there was a question here?
Yeah, I was just wondering that you're kind of talking about perception, right? So value proposition is also a value perception of value.
A value can be either something that you can look at, hard, examine, quantitative, or it's something qualitative that's more, it's more difficult to put a dollar sign to it. How do you put a dollar sign to a Gucci bag? You really can't, right? It's society that judges. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Well, I mean, you're like, say someone has to manufacture that perception for a Gucci bag to be worth, you can trade it.
Yeah, a lot of people put a lot of effort in building the brand around Gucci so that when you go in and buy it, there's a brand around it. And if those people did not put that hard work in building that brand, that marketing, that sales channel, all of it, then that Gucci bag is not worth $4,000. It's worth $40, right? Or whatever it is, X dollars, right? But you're paying that extra because of all that branding work that's been done or that endorsement by that celebrity. So yes, thank you, Paul, for keeping me honest. There's dollar sign value and then there's the qualitative value, right? That's value, right? So let's go back a little step here and go back to the very beginning. So what's the most important thing about a company? A non-profit company, or even a for-profit company, or even a non-profit company, doesn't matter. What's the most important thing? It is?
Delivers the value.
It?
Delivers the value.
Before it delivers the value. Before you deliver something, you need to?
The need.
Okay, we'll get to the need. You're jumping 2 steps back. But before you deliver the value, what do you need to do? You need to create the value, right? How do you deliver something you haven't created, right? So you've got to create that value before you can go and say, hey, look, I've got this. Come and buy it, whatever it is, right? For-profit companies, that value is money. I need to show my shareholders, my stakeholders that I've made money. For non-profit companies, it is a more intangible thing. I've increased the level of literacy in this area of the world or something like that. So there's all sorts of ways that you can slice and dice value. But the most important thing is you need to be able to create it. Now, to create value, what do you need to do?
Yeah. If you're really talking about creating the value proposition, your customer actually creates the value.
Exactly. Thank you. What do you need to do before you get to create value? You need to?
Create the value proposition.
Well, you need to find out what customers want.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the step back I was telling you. Before you go and jump and create value, you got to figure out, why are people going to actually buy this from the beginning? Right? Why are they going to pay for it? And usually people are going to want something because why do people buy stuff? It's fulfilling a need, or it's solving a problem, right? So that is the foundational step. You got to go look back and see, what is the problem? What is the need that these customers have? Any company, in my opinion, that starts with the idea, throw it in the trash can, right? Anybody can have a cool idea. You can build the best mousetrap in the world, but if nobody's willing to buy it because they have a painful need that your mousetrap's going to solve, that idea, in my opinion, is useless, right? So first, we've got to go back to the beginning before we start thinking of value creation and delivery. We got to think, why are people going to buy this? What is the problem is this solving? What am I trying to do here? Okay. So that is the very foundation of building a company, in my opinion. So to summarize, your company is nothing. You are nothing unless what? Unless you have customers who are willing to pay for your stuff, right? That's my first premise. Therefore, you need something to sell these customers, right? We're summarizing here again. But let's go back another step. Why would a customer care about what you're selling? Why? Why would somebody care about what you're trying to do?
They need it.
Because they need it. Why would they need it?
Solving their problem.
Yeah, or fulfilling a need, right? That's the only reason they're going to pay you. unless you know the uncle of somebody at the company, and then that's not a sustainable business model, right? No, I'm serious, because I've seen companies that were built based on one contract because they know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. But it's not a sustainable business model. You're not going to continue knowing people, right? So you got to get customers to care. How do you get customers to care? Yeah, go ahead.
The only thing, just to connect your
Yeah.
Paul's presentation with some of the assumptions
Okay.
that we're talking about here, I think what's interesting is what happens if the trajectory of the value, what's value changes, as in the underlying commodity that we use to exchange value changes from something that's monetary to non-monetary.
Right.
Like in
Can you ask me that question in a moment? No.
Sure.
That's a very good question, very
Yeah.
important question, and we'll talk about that, and that's called, anyway, we'll talk about it, but remind me about it, okay? So to get customers to care, you gotta become one. You've gotta understand them, understand what their pain is, understand what their problem is, understand why are they going to come and get interested in buying your solution. Why? Why? Right? So many entrepreneurs fail to answer or ask even the question of why are people going to pay me for this? Right? I've met so many entrepreneurs. I don't want to point fingers, but I'm just saying because I want to. No, I'm serious. I want to share this because it's so important. So many entrepreneurs come up and they tell me, Jad, I've got this massively good idea. And now I no longer have the patience, but when I did have the patience, okay, tell me about your idea. Right? And then goes a half-hour pitch. Now I don't have the patience anymore because I've learned my lessons the hard way. And they tell me, Jad, I've got this great idea. I'm like, I don't care. What are you trying to solve? Well, it's a cool idea. Let me tell you about it. I don't care. And your customer's not going to care. And your investors are not going to care. And your coworkers are not going to care. And that co-founder that you need to get on board, he's probably not going to care, or she's not going to care either. Right? You've got to show you've got a solution. And I think that is how the best companies get started is, here's the problem I'm trying to solve, right? So that's how you get customers to care. You address a painful problem they have. And that painful problem could be supply chain costs, or it could be that they want to show off in high society, or it could be anything in between, right? Now, the really good companies, the really, really good ones, create a problem and then solve it. Can anybody give me an example?
Pharmaceutical company.
No, okay, I don't want to go into that. No.
That's actually a good example.
Yeah, but I don't want to go there because it's out of my depth. But I'll give you an example.
Antivirus.
Sorry?
Antivirus.
Yeah, that's a good
Antivirus was also, no, it wasn't created by antivirus companies, okay? But here's some food for thought. I love this quote because I coach some entrepreneurs and they tell me, well, what if there isn't a solution? What if there isn't a problem? There's always a problem, always. Henry Ford, does anybody know who Henry Ford is? Who's Henry Ford? What did he invent? Horseless carriages, right, not the car. Got called the car later. Okay? No. Somebody else invented the engine. It was British.
Assembly line.
Okay, let's just stick with cars, okay? How about that? Okay? Hey, the crowd's getting too philosophical for me. Okay? So, one day somebody asked Henry Ford, why didn't you listen to people when you invented the car? And what was his very famous response? Does anybody know this?
Yeah.
Okay, no, not you. Not this table. Does anybody know what Henry Ford said? Go ahead.
I think someone said last week.
Okay, go ahead. It's a powerful example.
Yeah, I asked customers what they wanted, they would have said that.
Yeah, because nobody had an idea what a car was or what it can do. So Henry Ford, in one stroke, created the problem and the solution at the same time. The problem was transportation is not efficient. It was always efficient. We did the best we could with horses. But suddenly, overnight, not overnight, but that's how history, that's how we view it right now after 100 years, is almost overnight he created a problem in inefficiency in transportation. And he solved it with his horse and carriage. And then the car got incrementally improved on over the last 100 years. So there's always a problem. It's just that sometimes we don't see it because we haven't invented that problem yet. Right? So there are different classes of companies. There are some companies that have incremental improvements in what they're doing. You know what? I created software that makes, my first job was deploying logistical software for warehouse companies and logistics companies. And literally, our value proposition is that we save them 1% of their overhead. That was what we did. That was our pitch. 1% of your overhead. But that translated to millions and millions of dollars, right? So there's incremental improvements. Then you've got the really innovative stuff. You know, the new steel mills that recycle steel as opposed to making it from scratch from iron and coal. And then you've got the really innovative stuff that create the problem and the solution, like the internet, like the horseless carriage. You know, who predicted the internet and what it could do? Nobody. It created a problem and a solution at the same time. Cell phones, telegram, all of those things. Nobody could have predicted what the impact they would have. And many times, these classes of companies, they come by, you know, just accident, by mistake. So there's all sorts of value propositions you can predict. But always, always start with the customer and their problem. Right? So finally, in conclusion, before we jump into the business model canvas and tools you can use, to become something, you've got to solve a painful problem. Otherwise, I can guarantee you, you will fail, or if you succeed, you will need to have everything aligned in your favor, where the contrary is usually the case, where everything is stacked against it. So, what are the tools that we can use to break down this value proposition and start building a structure around it? My favorite one, and I've used this extensively in 2 companies, well, 2.5, is the business model canvas. You know, before the business model canvas, there was, you know, a lot of other methodologies and tools that you can use, and my least favorite one was called the business model. You know, writing a business plan. It is the most boring and futile exercise to write a business plan in the world. Right? You're just cranking out fluff, useless text, in my opinion, right? And it's insane, right? Because any good business plan needs to start with this. So why not just start with this? Now, what is this? Let's start breaking down this tool and what it can do for you. So first and foremost, and in the center, is the value proposition. And let's propagate from there. Let's start with the value proposition. So usually, we talked about the value proposition. So you've got to say, in my opinion, the value proposition starts with a problem and solution. You know, here's a solution, here's why people are going to pay for it, right? I don't care what your idea is, because anybody can build your idea probably. And not only that, you should be asking yourself the question, anytime you have an idea, my first challenge is usually, why hasn't anybody else built it? Because nobody else has built it, there's probably something wrong with your idea. Right? There's 7 billion people on this planet. Not all of them are privileged to build a company, but a big chunk of them are. There's a lot of resources going around. So if somebody hasn't built your idea, really think hard, why haven't they built it before? And usually it boils down to either it's a crappy idea, or it's very difficult to execute, or it's ahead of its time, or it really doesn't solve a problem. Right? So let's flip it on ahead, and in my opinion, write the value proposition always from the point of view of the customer. The person that's going to start paying you and cutting you checks. Right? And everything propagates from it. So value proposition. What is the solution? What is the problem? And therefore, what is the value that I'm creating? Right? We go to creating value. Now we need to start figuring out how to distribute the value to and how to give it to them. Right? It doesn't matter where you stop propagating. I usually start going into key activities. And to customers before key activities. So I jump into customers. Why? Because that's the most logical step after the solution, because these are the people who are going to open their checkbooks. Who are you going to sell it to? Where are they? You might have an idea that says, I want to sell antivirus, right? So you're not creating anything new. But now if you say, I want to sell antivirus to emerging markets in Africa who can't afford $50 antivirus subscription a year, that becomes a very valid business model, right? You've taken the same concept, but instead of applying it in North America or somewhere else, you've applied it somewhere else, right? So a new company doesn't necessarily have to be inventing something new. It could be doing something different elsewhere, the same thing elsewhere, right? So where are your customers? If you're a value brand, where are these customers, right? So does anybody have any problem with customer segments? I mean, I can drill down and talk about this ad infinitum. Tell me where you want me to focus on, okay? If you start sighing and getting bored, I'll move on to something else. Okay? Yeah, go ahead.
I do have a question.
Yeah, go.
In regards to business plans, actually.
Okay.
So do you see value in researching the area that
Yeah.
would be entering?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, here's why I'm going to qualify why I don't like business plans. I don't like them because they're a futile exercise. You waste a lot of time writing something where you could just put this up with a couple of friends and your co-founders, and within a couple of hours, you can really drill down to this cool stuff, right? A business plan, you're just writing and writing and writing, and you don't know what, so most of the time, I find myself not knowing what I'm going to write about next. This gives you structure. A business plan is usually all over the place, right? But research. Let me put it this way. If you don't do research, you shouldn't be even thinking about starting a company. The most important thing is doing research, right? But that's a good question. How do you research? How do you research?
That's really the benefit of the business plan. It says, they say that.
I don't want to go into that, but you know, research is very important. You've got to read analyst reports, but more importantly, you have to become an analyst yourself in that industry. Right? You've got to become comfortable.
You got to
with it.
understand your customer.
Exactly.
Everything about it.
Right. So usually the way I start researching, like my third company right now is game development. I had no clue in what game development was. I've never developed a game in my life. I did software, okay, so I understand software. But what I did is I started reading analyst reports, and then after I read analyst reports, I started talking to other founders of companies in this area. And then finally, when I became comfortable with the material, I started talking to customers, right? Going in, seeing their views, seeing what they need. And the funny thing about talking to customers is that's when you'll get your idea, and that's where you see your painful problem, right? Go ahead.
Just a quick follow-up on that. Are you looking for a pattern to identify a value proposition or just pain points? Like a trend?
You've got to have a working hypothesis, right? Like when I first started, I'll talk about my third company and how exactly it started. When it first started, some guy I met in my network came up to me, he was my co-founder for a while, came up to me and said, Jad, I've got this cool tech. Okay. I was a bit naive back then, so I decided to look at it. And I looked at his tech. And he spent 5 years developing it, basically made it easier to do it had some algorithms that make it easier to create 3D. So, okay, you can create these 3D faster, who cares? Right, so we started drilling down until we figured out the game industry spends 50% of their time and money on building 3D assets, right? You play a game like Halo or something, 50% of the budget went to building the world, building the models. So we said, great, we've got a great problem here that we can solve, right? We've got technology that we can apply against it. We didn't ask ourselves, why has nobody else done that? And we started building a company around this, right? Our first customer that we talked with, I was expecting we'll go in, throw open their jackets, and here's my money, just take it and give me your software, right? Didn't happen. Didn't happen. They're like, this is cool tech, we love what it can do, but our development pipeline is 3 years. We've already been doing this for 15 years the same way, and I sure as hell am not going to bust open my production pipeline for you. So get at it. Well, not in those words, but that's how it felt. Right? Not just one, but two, but three, but four. And then we realized, okay, we've got a great idea, but nobody wants to pay for it because we aren't selling it in the right way. Or probably what we're building is not correct either. So we have to change. You know, this goes back to the question that you asked someone. Do we have to do a pivot? We realized what we were building did not match what customers wanted. Right? So now we're building a platform that integrates into all their stuff and all this great stuff, so they don't have to feel it, you know, bit by bit. They can add modules and they don't feel the pain of integrating this new stuff. And before they know it, we've replaced their entire pipeline. Right? And they know that, but that's fine with them because, you know, they can experiment, they can play without any risk factor and stuff like that. So talking to customers is of paramount importance because you never know what you're going to find out. Even if you yourself are an expert in the industry, you never know, other people have different points of views. Right? So talk to customers. The more customers you talk with, the better. The more successful the more likely you're going to become successful. Right? Makes sense? So research, read reports, become an analyst, become an expert in the industry, talk to customers. Right? So value proposition, who's going to buy it, where are they? Customer segments can be either, I think you know this, I don't need to go over it, but basically, you know, age, income, location, occupation. What are you selling it to? Right? Where are they? How do you get them? Right? The second one, the next I'd like to go to customer relationship, is what type of relationship am I going to have with my customers? Right? You see this methodology asks the 9 major questions that you need to answer for a business. That's what I like about this, is it forces you to think about them. So, what's your relationship with your customer? What does that mean? Can anybody tell me what that means? Does anybody have a clue what that means? Go ahead.
How involved you're going to be with them? Is it going to be hands-on, hands-off?
Yeah, yeah, it's common sense. Exactly. Am I going to be directly involved with my customers, or do I need to work with somebody else who's going to take care of them? Why? Why is that question important to answer?
At the end of the day, it's a people business, no matter what business you're in.
Yeah, it drives hiring decisions, it drives costs, it drives revenue. Why? Because if you work with somebody else, they're going to eat a bite out of your revenue, but it means you don't have as much costs. So you see how important these questions are to answer, because they're going to drive the things down there, which is the revenue and the costs, which are really what are going to build your business, right? So how am I going to be dealing with my customers, right? And then, how am I going to reach my customers? How am I going to deliver that value I created to them? And that's channels, right? Am I going to build a brick and mortar store? Or am I going to sell through the internet? Or the billion other ways that you can reach your customers? You've got to think hard about answering the question. How am I going to deliver to them the value in the solution that I want to sell them? Right? Again, answering this question is going to be driving a lot of answers. One of those answers is partnerships, right? Who am I going to work with? Channels is going to provide some input into partners. Who do I need to get as my partners? Who do I need to get on board? Whose approval do I need? Right? Whose endorsement do I need? Do I need to work with somebody? Do I not need to work with somebody? What's the ecosystem like? Who are going to be my enemies out of the door? Who are going to be my friends out of the door? So these are all questions you need to answer. And if you answer them well, then you can actually start, that's when you start building your business, right? You start, does anybody see how these building blocks are starting to answer fundamental questions about how you build your business? Right? And then we go into key activities. What do I need to do? When do I need to do them? In which sequence, in which order? And this is really fun. Resources. What resources do I have? What are resources? Can anybody tell me an example of resources other than the money, which is the obvious one?
Network.
Sorry?
Network.
Network is a good resource. What else?
Time.
Employees,
Time.
human.
Humans, bodies, right? Full-time resources, FTEs. I love that. Right? I'm sorry, full-time FTRs or whatever. But I was a consultant, so we used to call them bodies. Oh, we need 12 bodies in this department. Anyway, so yeah. And here's the fun part about this thing, is when you start putting together all these things you want, you can say, oh, you know, I want a beautiful brick and mortar store, and I want it gold plated, and I want a gold road from here to El Dorado and all that stuff. But then you put your resources, and you realize you don't have the resources to pull it off. So what this forces you to do is it forces you to do a trade-off between what you have and what you want to build, because they got to balance out, right? So once you fill out and answer all these questions, it becomes very clear what your cost structure is going to be. What are my variable costs? What are my fixed costs? Right? And then once you set out what my business model is going to be, how am I going to sell it for how much, who's going to pay for it, etc. You have your financial statements and forecasts, right? And then you can start playing around with the numbers. So that's why I love this, because it forces you, A, to answer questions, B, it forces you to make trade-offs between what you want to build and what you actually have to build. Forces you to think about the customer first. It's always about the customer. It's always about the customer. It's always about the customer. Never forget that, right? And then you can use that to build a narrative, a business plan, a pitch. You can use it to build your financial statements, because you've answered most of the key questions.
Because you can really get involved in here, and your operation can really be built off if you don't have the right resources. How do you speed that or enhance that?
That depends on two things. A, where you currently are, what resources you currently have, and B, what resources you potentially can get access to, right? I mean, you can do wonders with $1 billion, but is it ever feasible you're going to get $1 billion? So there's actual resources and potential resources, right? So the question then becomes, how do I unlock my potential resources? What activities, what things do I need to do to unlock my potential resources? Right? For one concrete example is potential resources could be a second round around a Series B. Right? I need $10 million and it's feasible that I can get it. So then you work yourself back. What do I need to do to raise a Series B? Do I need users? Do I need adoption? Do I need partners? Or do I need a mix of all three? And there you go, you've got the activities you need. Right? So always think about what is the potential resources that I can get, and what are the activities I need to unlock that potential resource. But never fail to ask yourself, okay, if I do those steps, what is my trade-off? What am I losing if I do those 3 steps? Because you're trading something off. Right? There's no such thing as a free lunch. If you do A, you cannot do B anymore. So you got to find out what B is so you can make that proper decision. Does that help?
Yeah.
Think about potential resources. Yeah?
How would you tailor this towards like not-for-profit?
I can't hear you, sorry.
How would you tailor this towards not-for-profit?
So yeah, that's a good question. So not-for-profit, your value proposition may not be dollar signs anymore. It's going to be something different. The most important thing will be resources, right? Where am I getting them, and who's going to give them to me? Because your customers, right? Or at least let me rephrase: the people who are going to give you the resources are not your customers anymore, right? So it's a different relationship. So I would still use this, but instead of calling it, instead of like, just where am I going to get my money from? The resources, how am I going to get those? So it's probably going to go to partners. Your partner's going to look different, right? So it's the question is about how do I get my resources to do what I want? Again, what are the steps that I need to do to unlock more and more and more and more resources, right? Okay. Any other questions? Anyway, I'm around. I'm happy to answer more questions if you have them. But basically, I just want to say, you know, reiterate some things. A, it's always about the. Yeah, I saw it on your lips, right? It's always about the customer. Always. You know, they're going to pay you their money, or at least they're going to let other people pay you your money. Like if you're a non-for-profit and your customers are not, you're not hitting your benchmarks, you're not going to get more funding, or whatever it is, right? So your customer is the most important thing. Yeah, go ahead.
You have worked with so many other companies. So from your experience, can you give us some example on how to effectively manage customer relationships?
How to effectively manage a customer relationship. Yeah, I'll tell you one word that works always. Customer is king. Right? Customer is king. That's how you manage. I don't know how to make it more simple unless you tell me more details. Customer is always king. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
You treat a customer like royalty. You really do. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes there are bad customers, and you need to learn how to tell them no. But you tell them no in a way that they don't go around and bitch and say, oh, this little, whatever, I'm going to write a review about him, and nobody's going to buy anything from you anymore. Right? So you need to learn how to manage customers. That doesn't mean take all customers, but at least, always be polite. Always make them feel, treat them well. There's all sorts of sales tips, about how to make a few people feel better. What's a good book? Anyway, I have a couple of books in mind. I'll tell you about them later. But there's all sorts of ways and techniques to make customers feel good. Customers not always right, but you make them feel they're always right, right? So basically, I like using this because it's a framework. Help me ask the key questions, and they're all interrelated. Once you start with the value proposition, the customer, it all feeds into each other, and it's a feedback cycle. So you answer questions here, it's an exchange here, until you reach a need.
So yeah, when you're doing your B round, you just use this, or do you have a business plan?
When I use, so this helps me get my thinking straight so I can prepare the material properly for my B round. What is the story that I'm trying to tell? So my B round right now depends on 2 things, right? It depends on customer acquisition, and it depends on partnerships, right? And I need to show both. And we were able to figure out that by using this, by the way. We were able to drill down.
See the value of that. I'm just asking you, do you need a business plan now?
No.
20-page document.
No. No investor that I know of will read a business plan. None. Zero. Right? They may browse it, they may look at it, but at a B round level, they'll probably want your financials. And they'll probably want, more, a deeper document, a heavier document than a business plan. And at that point, what you want to show them. What I show the people that I'm talking with for my B round right now is my acquisition numbers and my financials. That's an executive summary, like half a page. What are we trying to do? And that's what they ask for anyway. Like most of the people that I meet, but this is a B round. We're trying to raise 10 million. So this is my second round for this company, and most of the investors, all of them without exception, actually ask me for an executive summary and financials and financial forecasts. That's all they ask for.
So they want what, 3-4 pages?
No, an
describing
executive
the-
summary, 1 page.
1 page?
Yeah. And I've had people tell me if it's more than 1 page,
No nonsense.
no nonsense. Just get to the point. What is the problem? What is the solution? How are you going to? What's your business model? And show me the financials. So this helps build towards that, right? Especially at an early stage. The last thing I want to leave you with is a word of caution. Never, ever do this alone, right? Because if you do it alone, you're going to come up with so much crap that it's incredible how much crap you're going to come up with, and how much, what's the word? There's a word for it. I'm forgetting it. But anyway, you logically assume away, or you assume a lot of assumptions. Oh yeah, of course they'll pay for it, right? Always work with a partner, and my advice is be really hard on each other, right? Okay, if they tell you that's a great idea, kick him in the ass. Tell them, why is it a great idea? Right? Because customers are not going to be forgiving. So, those are my words of wisdom. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have later on. Okay? Good luck.